Somewhere tonight, she is lying in a bed that feels too quiet, replaying a version of you she never let you see her miss. Not the version who fought for her, not the version who asked why, the version from before all of it, back when things were easy and she still believed she could stay. Here is what almost nobody tells you about the silence she left behind. It was never peace on her end either. And by the middle of this video, you will know the exact scene playing on a loop in her head, the one she has never said out loud to anyone, not even herself. I know this scene because I have been the one running it, long before I understood what it meant. Leaving without a word never feels like escape from the inside. It feels like disappearing before you can be caught failing at something you already convinced yourself you would fail at. And by the end of this video, you will understand exactly what she is replaying tonight, why she left the way she did, and why silence was never the same thing as not caring. Here is what catches most people off guard about the way an avoidant woman leaves. From your side, it looked sudden, clean, almost cold. From her side, it was neither sudden nor clean. It was a final second of a much longer collapse she had been having quietly. One you were never shown, because showing it would have meant staying long enough to be questioned about it. You have probably imagined her side of this already, more than once. Maybe you pictured her moving on effortlessly, laughing somewhere without a single thought of you. Maybe you picture the opposite, convinced she must be shattered too, just better at hiding it. Maybe the truth you have never let yourself consider is smaller and stranger than either version, that she is not fully at peace and not fully broken either, just caught somewhere between relief and a version of grief she does not know how to name. But here is the part almost nobody explains about the way this actually plays out in her head. What you assume she feels and what she is actually replaying are rarely the same scene. If that sounds like something meant to comfort you into thinking she regrets it entirely, stay with me, because that is not the scene either. This is not a video about her secretly wanting to come back. This is about understanding what genuinely loops in her mind at night, so you stop building a story out of silence that was never designed to explain anything. To be clear, this is not a video telling you she has suffered more than you, or that her nightly replay means she made the wrong choice. This is about the specific mechanism behind what she remembers, and why it almost never matches a version you have built in her absence. Let us get into it. The first thing playing in her head most nights is not the ending. It is a moment from the middle, something ordinary she did not recognize as significant while it was happening. A quiet car ride, a meal where nobody needed to perform, a moment you probably do not even remember clearly yourself, because it did not feel like a big one at the time. For her, these are the scenes that surface, not the blow-ups, not the goodbye, because those moments were tangled up in the exact panic that made her leave. The ordinary ones are safe enough to revisit without triggering the alarm that ended things. The second thing looping in her head is a version of herself she is quietly ashamed of, the one who left without explaining anything. Contrary to what silence looks like from the outside, most avoidant women know exactly how much that silence costs the other person. She is not naive to the damage. What she replays is not confusion about your pain. It is a private argument with herself about why she could not stay present long enough to explain it while it still mattered. Keep that in mind, because it explains the third and hardest scene coming up shortly, the one she avoids thinking about the longest. Here is where most people misread this entirely, in one of two directions. Some assume her silence proves she felt nothing, that leaving without a word means she was simply done, emotionally finished before she even packed a bag. Others assume the opposite, that the silence must be hiding some enormous unspoken love, proof that she is secretly devastated and will eventually come back once she processes it. Neither assumption is usually correct, because both skip the same detail. The leaving was never about how much she felt. It was about how unsafe those feelings became once they got large enough to require her to stay and face them. Because here is what rarely gets said clearly enough. The reason she left without a word was never that the relationship stopped matching. It was that it started matching too much, past the point her system knew how to tolerate, and leaving quietly felt like the only available exit from a closeness that had begun to feel like exposure. Picture what that exposure actually meant to her. Every question you asked, however gentle, every attempt to get closer to what she was really feeling registered less like connection and more like being cornered. Not because you did anything wrong, but because closeness that requires her to explain herself out loud has always felt, to her nervous system, like being asked to hand over something she does not fully trust anyone with. including herself. Now here's the scene I promised earlier, the one she avoids the longest, and it is smaller than either of you would expect. It is not the breakup itself. It is a specific memory of you looking at her with real hope, right before things started slipping, a look she recognized instantly and could not sit inside. That look is the one she replays most, not because it hurt her, but because some part of her already knew, in that exact second, that she would eventually leave the person giving it to her, and she has never forgiven herself for knowing it that early and staying anyway. There is also a quieter dynamic worth naming here. The nightly replay is rarely about you specifically, even though it features you. It is about her own pattern, showing up again in a place she genuinely did not want it to. Some part of her hoped this time would be different. That closeness with you would not eventually feel like danger the way it always had before. When it did anyway, what she is really replaying is a disappointment of watching herself do the same thing again, not disappointment in you for being wrong for her. Which brings up the real question underneath all of this. Not does she regret leaving, but what was she actually running from when she left? Because there's a version of an avoidant woman who eventually does the work, who learns to stay present through the exact moment that one sent her running, who names the fear instead of disappearing from it. That version is possible, but it requires real self-examination, and it almost never arrives simply because someone missed her enough to wait around for it. Here is what matters most if this is the person you are still thinking about tonight. The scene playing in her head is not proof that she is quietly waiting to return, and it is not proof that she never cared either. It is proof that closeness with you touched something she has never fully faced in herself. Long before you were ever part of the picture, you did not become unlovable in the moment she left. You simply got close enough to a place in her that still runs on old alarms, ones that were built long before she ever knew your name. So there are two honest paths forward here, and neither one requires you to keep guessing what she feels. If part of you is still waiting on her silence to eventually turn into an explanation, the honest path is not refreshing your phone for a message that closure rarely arrives that way, and it is giving yourself the explanation you deserve, even without her. If you are past the waiting already, the honest path is not needing to know exactly what she replays at night to finally let this go. It is trusting that her silence was never a message written for you to decode. It was a door closing on something she was not ready to face, in herself, long before it ever involved you. Both paths are valid, and neither one keeps you standing outside a door that already closed. Because the goal was never to earn a version of her that finally stays. The goal is to end up somewhere solid, whether that means understanding this enough to release it, or building a life steady enough that her silence stops needing translation at all. And that release starts right now.